Thank you for joining us. This is Jeff Ruby, and this is Coach and Hold Your Team Accountable. I'm located in Tampa, Florida. RedRock Leadership works really all over the country. We've trained folks in India, South America, Israel. I'll also let you know that I'm in the process of writing a book. We're in the final phases. It's due for release in December. It's called RedRock Leadership: Transform Your Company Culture and Unleash Your Potential for Exponential Growth. Also, I want to make sure you understand that we're on, of course, all the social media channels, but two particular channels are rather important: Facebook and LinkedIn. Also, we just launched a podcast, so we're into our third or fourth episode right now. We're available really on any of the platforms. We're available on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Google, iHeartRadio. So check out our podcast. If you've been checking out the first couple, I promise you they're going to get better. I've got a podcast coach. There's a coach for everything these days, and we're working on content and making them more meaty. They're short podcasts, so I call them treadmill podcasts. So if you'd like to catch some of the things that we teach and talk about, let's get started. The approach state and the avoid state, very important. We teach this at RedRock Leadership, and it's an entree into almost all of the training sessions we do. Very important to call these two states out, the approach state and the avoid state, especially when we're talking about coaching. So let me review this very quickly. For some of you that have received our training before, you know about the approach state and the avoid state. If you've not been part of RedRock Leadership Training, then you may not have heard of this before. There are three different types of people, and we correlate this to a person's level of emotional intelligence. The first level is called laggard, and this is basically someone who is in a defensive sort of mindset. They're living in a win-lose paradigm. Their trust level is very low, and their perseverance is very low. So they don't trust people around them. They don't trust process, and they're not necessarily willing or even able to persevere. And just an FYI about this, there is no person on the planet that's immune to becoming a laggard or being a laggard at any given time. When you are a laggard, you reside in what's called the avoid state. When you're in the avoid state, you're desperate and you're discouraged. And in turn, unfortunately, those around you become desperate and discouraged. So we're going to go ahead and talk about being an effective coach and holding your team accountable. It's important that we call out these states, the avoid state and the approach state. There's another level of emotional intelligence that we train here at RedRock that we discuss quite a bit, and that's called the loner level. The loner is someone who's dutiful, and their paradigm they live in is a win paradigm. So a loner is someone who trusts just enough to get themselves by, and they persevere just enough to get themselves by. They don't necessarily trust other people or systems and processes unless it's going to directly benefit them. They live in a very unique paradigm because loners can absolutely generate a profit for your company. They can drive revenue. The problem with a loner is they don't play well in the sandbox. And so we label this person, at least half of this person, someone who resides in the avoid state. At times, they are desperate, they're discouraged, and they tend to release that sort of energy to the people around them. Then we get to the third level, and that's called the leader level. The leader is someone who is collaborative. They live in a win-win or walk-away paradigm. And what this means is the leader does not allow the frontal lobe of their brain to become disengaged. They are able to manage their emotions in such a way that if they feel their heart rate increasing, if they feel their emotions begin to rise, they know how to take themselves out of a situation before the frontal lobe of their brain disengages. And when that frontal lobe of the brain begins to disengage, that's when cortisol rises, adrenaline rises, and emotion tends to take over for us, and we're unable to make logical decisions. So a leader is someone who lives in what's called the approach state. It's a very intentional state. It's a conscious state. They're about inspiration and encouragement. This is more than just being in a good mood. This is more than just having positive mental attitude. This is a conscious state whereby someone actually may be feeling the pressure of anxiety or depression. However, they're able to literally guard against it by managing their emotions. A leader is someone who trusts and they persevere beyond measure. And they trust process, they trust people. As you can see, at any given time, any of us can reside as a laggard, a loner, or a leader. The other thing is important to call out is there are specific times, and I mentioned that half of the time a loner is in the avoid state. There is a good sort of a loner, if you will. There's a loner that resides in the approach state. That is someone who walks away and needs to get quiet for a little while, needs to shut their door, needs to just sort of gather their thoughts or sit down and plan their day or set their goals. That type of a loner would not necessarily be seen as desperate, discouraged. It's a more intentional state. Let's talk about what is accountability. Well, accountability is an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility or to account for one's actions. Let's just think about this for a minute. Why do any of us hire an accountant? It's because we have an obligation or a willingness to accept responsibility for our actions when it comes to our tax returns. We think so much about being accountable to our finances or accountable to the IRS that we'll go ahead and we'll actually hire an accountant to do that because we have an obligation or willingness to accept responsibility to account for our own actions. Accountability it's very interesting. We throw this term around as we do a lot of terms in American business. Accountability is something that we sort of slap on other people. We say to ourselves, well, we need to hold our team accountable, or we need to hold people accountable as if we're going to tie them down and make them do something. If we look at accountability as something that we're going to make someone do, it's never going to work. What is the purpose of accountability? Well, the purpose of accountability is to ensure excellence or to be as close to perfect as possible. For some of you that have worked with me over some extended period of time, you know how important I believe core values are to your culture and how important they are to upholding the standards that you want to establish within your culture. Many of you have told me these have been game changers for you to establish the core values of your culture and hold people accountable to those core values. Now, mind you, when I say hold people accountable, recognize that when we unveil core values, we want to give our team the opportunity to accept those core values, join in the participation of protecting the culture and adhering to those core values. Hear what I said, give them the opportunity to do so. So remember, accountability is something that we want to impress upon someone the level of importance that it has. So we want to ensure excellent or to be as close to perfect as possible. It's something that has to be intact when we coach people. How important is accountability? Well, the importance of accountability, it's relative. It's relative. And it depends on diligence and determination. By who? By you and by the folks that you are coaching, mentoring, supervising, overseeing. Remember this. It's a very important piece to the puzzle, accountability. However, it's relative and it depends on your willingness to be diligent and determined in the process. If you're not going to be diligent and determined to hold folks accountable or to uphold the integrity of your culture, don't expect other people to take part in it. I want to tell you a story, an interesting story that I probably have shared with some of you. I do a lot of work with high schoolers, high school boys, and they're typically ninth graders. I love ninth grade because it's a very impressionable year. The thing about ninth graders is they're at the bottom of the food chain. The prior year, they were at the top of the food chain. They were in middle school. They were at the top of the food chain. Now they're at the bottom of the food chain. And the one thing that I always impress upon ninth graders is that over the course of the next 4 years, you are going to be challenged to be as cool as you can possibly be. And what happens is you're going to either adhere to the standards of other people to allow you to become cool, or you're going to determine what your standards are, and you're going to set the tone for the culture of the people that you want to surround you. So I had a group that I was working with, and I tend to work with them for about 11 months at a time. We were focusing specifically with this one group I'd been working with, and this is about 3 years ago. They were they were really owning up to some of the things that they wanted to have for standards for themselves, and it was a really tight knit group of guys, and they were meeting one morning, and they were having a conversation. I said, "Hey, Mr. Jeff, we're thinking about having an accountability group, and we would like to meet on Tuesday evenings." And we were meeting on Sunday mornings, and I said, "Well, guys, that sounds great. And however, I don't know if Tuesday evenings are going to work for me." And they said, "Well, Mr. Jeff, we don't want you to be there for that." And I thought to myself, for a minute, I started taking it back, and I thought, well, why wouldn't they want me there? And then I thought, well, wait a second, this is fantastic. They're holding themselves accountable. And I often tell this to business owners and leaders, because it's important for you to know that if you create the right culture of collaboration where people trust you, they'll ultimately trust each other, and they'll learn to persevere together. They'll hold each other accountable. I see this over and over again in company cultures where the owner and the leaders of the culture are into accountability. They accept responsibility and they communicate in like fashion. It's contagious. So it's all relative. It depends on your diligence and determination. There are three primary types of coaching. I want to go through this rather quickly because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. This is a little bit of I would say a commercial, if you will, inside of the webinar. Keep in mind, at RedRock Leadership, we offer ongoing training and reinforcement. We have a series called Take the Lead, and it's a leadership plus management series. And in that series, we go in some deep detail about how to create coaching plans. And so I talk specifically about three types of coaching: personal coaching, skills coaching, and performance coaching. Now, personal coaching, if we're going to do a personal coaching assessment, what we're going to be assessing for is someone's level of personal awareness, integrity, internal motivation. And these are the three types of skill sets that we're going to identify in personal coaching. Now, mind you, personal awareness, integrity, and internal motivation are three key competencies to emotional intelligence. And so these three key competencies are focused on one's intrapersonal skills. These three skills right here are what will help someone develop a cognitive sense about trusting other people. If you could develop someone's level of personal awareness, their integrity, and their internal motivation, we could absolutely increase someone's cognitive ability to trust others, and that's when confidence begins to rise. So when you see someone has low confidence, and that sometimes is called out when they make others the brunt of their jokes, or they're quick to anger, or they don't like to speak out in crowds, or they don't look you in the eye when they talk, or there's a consistent tardiness issue going on. They are consistently late with getting their tasks completed. They lack personal goals, so on and so forth. These are all items or signals that someone may be needing some personal coaching. Now, the personal coaching assessment that we have, I'm going to show you a quick screenshot of it in a little while, a little later in the webinar. Important to know, personal awareness is someone's ability to recognize their influence on others. And so if someone doesn't have that level of personal awareness, ultimately their integrity is going to suffer. And so somebody will say, "What do you mean that they'll be a liar?" It could be. It could be that they tell tales. They're constantly over-promising. Many times they begin to believe their own lies because they've never worked on their level of personal awareness. You, as a coach, can help people with this. You can help your people develop these skills and these competencies through coaching. You can help them become more, have a higher level of integrity. You could teach them internal motivation. Internal motivation is the ability to do the right things for the right reasons. The definition of integrity, as I define it, is letting our intentions match our actions. So if you have somebody who is consistently saying they're sorry, they're sorry, they're sorry, they're sorry, their intentions are consistently not matching their actions, we can help them course correct that. Internal motivation is another skill that can be developed. I will say this to anyone who's listening. If you want to become a more effective coach, I would strongly suggest you become stronger in these skills. Internal motivation means do the right things for the right reasons. That means you have what's called intrinsic motivation, as opposed to extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation means that the reason why you're still in your job is because you're afraid that if you quit your job, you won't have a paycheck. Or if you don't do your job well, you'll get in trouble. Know that some of the folks that work for you are acting this way. They're basically operating on a premise of carrots and sticks. They'll drive performance when you give them incentives. They'll improve if you give them incentives, but then they sort of run scared if the incentives aren't there, and then they'll come back around and wonder if they're going to get in trouble if you don't if they don't do what you ask them to do. This could be annoying as a leader, and you probably know this. You get annoyed by people who are yes people. Yes people have a low level of internal motivation. You ever have someone who you ask them a question, you say, "Hey Billy, can you meet with me tomorrow afternoon so we can go over the plan for our meeting next week?" And Billy says, "Yeah, no, yeah, no, yeah, no." It always cracks me up. "Hey, you want to go out to lunch?" "Yeah, no, yeah, no." They say yes and no in the same sentence. They're literally confused, and this is because they haven't the proper mapping hasn't been mapped out in their brains. Coaching helps you map people's brains. Keep this in mind. Let's go back to emotional intelligence, and I alluded to this in the very beginning. Out the frontal lobe of our brain will absolutely become disengaged when our heartbeat gets up, around, and above 95 beats per minute. The frontal lobe of the brain begins to become disengaged. That frontal lobe of the brain is known for logic. So that's where all of the formulas that you developed over time, all the logic, all the critical thinking skills that you develop over time are combined right there in the frontal lobe of the brain. And so what happens for folks that lack these skills, they get stunned very quickly. Their heart rate increases. The frontal lobe of the brain begins to disengage when fear or disappointment arises, or they become embarrassed. You see people begin to blush, things like that. That's their heart rate's rising. And what's happening is their system's having a reaction to an excess level of cortisol and adrenaline, and it's causing the brain, the frontal lobe of the brain, to shut down, and the back of the brain, the primitive part of the brain where the amygdala resides, is beginning to release some of these hormones into their system, and they're beginning to have a reaction to it. We can help them remap these formulas and stay in the game longer without getting emotional through coaching. And I'm going to go into some detail a little bit later about the words that you can use and how you can shape people's mindsets or shape their actions through your actions and through your words. Skills coaching assessment is an assessment that we basically are working on their empathy and their social skills. These are two more competencies of emotional intelligence. However, empathy and social skills are interpersonal skills. These are the skills for communication. Now, keep this in mind. This is very interesting. Stephen Covey says that the number one skill of humans is specifically communication. So empathy and social skills are how someone communicates. Those are the skills on the outside of them. Skills coaching assessment is going to help you determine if someone needs skills coaching, or do they need performance coaching, or do they need personal coaching. Keep in mind, personal coaching, that was the first level of coaching I spoke about. That is scheduled coaching. And I like to have appointments on my calendar with them where there's a reoccurring setting where I'm working them through some personal coaching. Skills coaching is more impromptu. Skills coaching can be OJT, on the job coaching. I just received here a question. Colleen, curious to know how to bring someone back to performance once they've had reached the emotional state and have disengaged. Great question. If you are working with someone and they have disengaged, and you could see that the frontal lobe of their brain has become disengaged, and typically this will happen because you'll start to see them. They'll act differently. They'll lose eye contact. Sometimes they start to throw little mini tantrums, or they'll check out. So remember, fight or flight. They begin to fight you, or they begin to just check out of the conversation. If you have someone who has disengaged, I would strongly suggest that you take a break. Remember, a leader walks away. Don't feel bashful about walking away, or don't feel bad about walking away if you see somebody begin to disengage. I would not continue a coaching session with someone who has become disengaged. One of the things that I'll typically ask someone before I walk into a coaching session, and I'm going to give you the guidelines for coaching in a little bit later here in the webinar. One of the things I'll typically ask someone prior to a coaching session, if it's a scheduled session or an impromptu session, is, are you okay? Can I talk to you about a couple of things? Is your mind open? Are you in a state of mind where you can receive what I'm about ready to talk with you about? Give them the opportunity to say no. And if they say no, it's been a rough morning. No, I had a rough night. Don't push it. Honor that. Teach them that the walkaway skill is a valid skill. Don't press them. If they are stuck in that avoid state, if they're stuck in that laggard state over some extended period of time, I addressed this in the webinar last month in the session that we called How to Motivate Your Team. So if you want to go back and check that webinar out, you can access it on our website under the how-to videos. So look under resources, under how-to videos, and go ahead and take a look at that webinar. But we talk specifically about folks that may not be a core value fit for your organization, folks that are spending extended periods of time in the avoid state may simply just not be a fit for your culture. And you'll have to do what's called harnessing harmful behavior. And that's kind of like a hard reset to regain their commitment. To get someone out of that avoid state, sometimes it just takes time. And you have to remember, many times it's not about you. It may not even be about the environment. And it may be about a personal problem that they have, and there may need to be some personal coaching. So my suggestion is just to be very, very cognizant of what's going on. Remain in the approach state. When you're in the approach state, you're approachable. And there may be a slide or two towards the end that'll address this in a little bit more detail. The third level of coaching, or the third type of coaching, is called performance coaching. So to do a performance coaching assessment, we're basically going to take a look at the person's vision, their goals, their strategies, their action steps, and their accountability. I'd like to point out something about these 5 components. A vision is supported by goals. Goals are supported by strategies. Strategies are supported by action steps, and action steps are supported by accountability. If you are trying to take someone in the organization and promote them, succession planning is a big part of many of our organizations. We're looking for someone to take over for ourselves, or we're looking to expand and scale. So succession planning is a big deal. That means moving someone from a supervisory role to a managerial role, or somebody from a director to a VP, or somebody into the president's role, moving them up in the organization. Performance coaching that's exactly what that's for. If you have someone who's not very skilled and has the potential, but it's not necessarily skilled in developing business plans, or if you want to promote them to sales manager, or you're trying to raise them up to become a team lead, but they just don't know how to cast their vision, or set their goals properly to incorporate other people, or set a strategy or a plan, and set up measures for accountability. This is where performance coaching comes into play. It's also important for me to mention, there's a lot to mention, so I throw a lot of information out here to you. I also want you to think about the aspect of cause and effect. Cause and effect. An exercise that I'll frequently do in training is I'll have groups get together. I'll have managers and owners and leaders from different companies mix and match at sticky note posters on the wall. And in fact, if you want to take a minute right now just to jot some of these things down yourself. I'll walk you through a little exercise that may help put you in a better position to get into the approach state before you move into coaching and before you move into assessing folks on what level of coaching they need. So here's the exercise. Simply take out a piece of paper. You probably have a notepad in front of you right now. And I want you to just brainstorm 1, 2, or 3 items that are happening right now in your office with the folks in your office. And there's a reason why you're on this call, right? Let me give you an example. Somebody yesterday said tardiness is an issue. And I said, okay, good. Write that down and tell me, is that the cause or the effect? They said, oh, I don't understand. I said, well, you will in a minute. Is that the cause or the effect? Because what I want you to do is, if tardiness is the issue, determine, is it the cause or the effect? And I had one group say it was a cause, and another group said it was the effect. The cause of tardiness could simply just be lack of accountability. The effect of tardiness could simply just be the idea that the rest of the team doesn't have a sense of urgency. You can pick whatever you'd like. So I'm going to just give you a minute here to write down for yourselves causes and effects. So in your environment, something's happened, determine if that's a cause or the effect. And if it's the effect, what's the cause? If it's the cause, what's the effect? Could I just have 1 or 2 of you just chat in a cause and effect to me now? Here comes one. Understaffing. So understaffing, I think, is the cause, and the effect looks like backlog or burnout. The cause is understaffing. The effect is backlog or burnout. Good. I've got one here, lack of initiative. Now, is that the cause or the effect? I'm curious if you could just kind of ping me back on that one. Lack of initiative. Is that a cause or effect? That's an effect. So what would the cause be of the lack of initiative? Status quo, staying inside the box. This is actually a very good one. This is the effect is lack of initiative, and the cause is the status quo and staying inside the box, playing it safe, right? Take a look at the effect and the cause, and I want you to rewrite them. So if the effect is lack of initiative, if there wasn't lack of initiative, what would there be instead? So what would exist inside the organization, or what would exist with this person? New and innovative ideas. Okay, so perfect. So we could take a look and say the effect right now is lack of initiative, but we could say that the new effect, if we coach this person properly, could be new and innovative ideas. Perfect. Here comes another one. We could set goals. That could be another effect. What could be the new cause? So if the old cause was status quo, staying inside the box, what could be the new cause? Team collaboration, stretching beyond the boundaries. Good. So let's use stretching beyond the boundaries. Hopefully you're tuned in to what's going on here. Let me bring us back to the very beginning of our session. And I talked to you specifically about this idea of a void state and approach state. As coaches, if we're not careful, here's what happens. We see our environment how it exists, and our environments look like understaffed. They look backlogged and burned out. They look like lack of initiative. They look like the status quo and everything staying inside the box. Well, what we must do before we enter into coaching sessions, before we enter into a place where we're going to lift our team up, we have to change our own mind. And we can change our own mind by simply just rewriting the future. Think about that. And that's what great leaders do. They rewrite the future. So Yvonne, what you did here is you rewrote the future. You said right now we have lack of initiative. However, we could rewrite the future and we could actually see something that looks like new and innovative ideas. And the way we could do that is by teaching people or coaching people to stretch beyond their boundaries. So keep this in mind as I walk to the next slide. As we develop a coaching plan, and there's some documents that we have. If you're interested in these documents, if you'll go ahead and message me privately, or just go ahead and send me an email or give me a call. Let's talk about how I can the right way to get some of these documents in your hand, or some of the other training we might have to help you along here. But the coaching plan, as you're going to see, is a document that right in the center, right below the center of this coaching plan document, I've got describe what looks to be a positive future, or what a positive future looks like. When you go into a coaching session, gang, I want you to make sure that you are not pointing out the negatives, but you're pointing out the positives. Instead of pointing out the idea that there's a lack of initiative, we want to point out the opportunity that exists in the area of new and innovative ideas, creative thinking. I want to point the future out. So here's what I always say to folks that are wanting to enhance their coaching skills. Don't miss this piece. Coach to the effect. Coach to the effect. That means coach to a more positive future. So if you want the effect to be something different, coach to that effect. So when you are working with an individual, you want to help them rewrite the cause in order to get to a better effect. The coaching plan will help you do that. So the coaching plan is very important in helping you track the progress of an individual. It's also very effective in helping you document what the team member that you're coaching is committing to. Remember, accountability is something that they must be personally responsible and bought in for. It can't be just you wanting to hold them accountable. They have to want to be held accountable. So when I do a coaching session, I ask them specifically, do you want to be held accountable? What is your commitment in all of this? I get I have a service called Active Sales Management. And so I have about 15 salespeople that I am currently overseeing for a client of mine. I get a daily call report. Some of you may get daily call reports. Those can be extremely detrimental, because if people aren't making calls, it's very easy to see see the glass is half empty. When I get that call report, the way I use it is I use it as a way to come back around and help them become more accountable. So if John is making 40 calls a day and he should be making 60 calls a day, I don't call John out and say, John, this isn't good. You're only making 40 calls a day. I call John up and I say, John, is everything okay? You had committed to making 60 calls a day. I see you're only making 40 calls a day. I want to help you through this, because remember, we're trying to get to that more positive effect. And what happens is they get bought into it and they begin to take ownership themselves. Personal coaching plans can look something like this. We have a personal coaching plan, like I said, calls out these 3 different areas. I go ahead and score them so that I'm able to take a more objective look at keep that in mind when you're coaching. It's very important to be objective, not subjective. And that's why you have to do that little exercise to rewrite your own mindset, because subtle annoyances can drag us down. And I will tell you that going into a coaching session as a laggard yourself pays no dividends. In fact, it just causes your stock to just plummet. So having a document like this that'll help you become more objective in your developing of a personal coaching plan or a skills coaching plan, a document that helps you objectify how you're going to go about coaching an individual, a objective performance coaching plan. So you're able to rate each individual on how well they're doing in each of these areas. By the way, you as the coach fills this out. It's very important to know that I don't hand this out to my team to fill out. This is my own way of subjectively looking at my team and then making an objective assessment on what's going on with my team. I also incorporate other things. I use what's called a DISC assessment with driving forces. And again, I went over some of this in last month's webinar. Very important if you're not having your team do personal assessments. Oh my goodness, this is like having your own instruction book for each individual. I get coaching tips in there. I get what motivates them. I helps me identify what their stressors are, what their energizers are. And when they see that, it's like stacking the deck. I mean, you can virtually get on the same page by them validating for you, yep, this is me, and us being able to treat them in a way that they're going to be receiving what it is we're going to be coaching them on. Very, very important. And that even, Colleen, the question you had earlier about how do I lift someone out of the avoid state, or how do I lift somebody out of that state? I use the assessments for that many times. I've not had many people look at their assessment and not agree with them. And that really is a great tool to help someone come back to a center point. I'll also throw this out to you as well. If you're looking for a way to pull somebody up out of the avoid state, I use what's called a gratitude journal. Every morning, I'll write down 10 things I'm grateful for. You write down 10 things you're grateful for, and let's text each other back and forth to help each other, remind each other what we're grateful for. And that also, if you do that with some of your team, that will allow you to get on the same page and allow you to, what do they say? Rising tides lifts all boats, right? So if you can get a few folks on your team to begin to look at life that way, you as a coach begin to lift the tide of the team. Let's go through the guidelines for coaching. I literally have 7 guidelines for coaching. First of all, when you coach, I already said this, you want to make sure you're objective. You want to gather accurate information and be objective. You want to take yourself through a cause and effect exercise to make sure that you know exactly the angle that you're looking at. If you've ever sat in a room that the sun is coming through the window and looked at the perspective of the room from the right corner and then moved to the left corner, sometimes the room can look completely different. I strongly suggest that you're looking at your team and the individuals on your team from every angle possible and making the information that you share with them very objectifiable. So if you have salespeople and you're recording calls, you can use that call data as objective information. Second guideline, be specific when providing feedback. Don't generalize. Generalizing is a sign of stereotyping, and stereotyping is a sure sign that you're annoyed about something. So be careful about generalizing and stereotyping. Be very, very specific when providing feedback. I like to draw stories from times when I perhaps wasn't capitalizing or performing well in that particular area. Tell stories. Be very specific when providing feedback. Number 3, ask questions to promote collaboration. Remember this, open-ended questions open up a conversation, and closed-ended questions close down a conversation. Now, you have to be very conscious, alert, approach state in order to focus specifically on what I'm talking about here. There are specific times during a coaching session or through dialogue with one of your teammates that you want to make sure that you're asking open questions. Open questions open up the conversation. They get information out on the table. They allow people to feel like they're in control. While closed-ended questions are times when you actually have to gain control yourself to reel the conversation back in. I find so many times that coaches, good, effective coaches, aren't using this strategy properly, and their coaching sessions are lackluster simply because they're not promoting collaboration. They're asking questions like, do you know why you're not hitting curveballs? Do you know why your calls are so low? You're asking questions that are just closing the conversation down. Instead, ask questions like, during the hours of 12 and 4 o'clock, talk to me about the quality of your talk time. It opens up the conversation, and many times they'll begin to lay things out on the table. Note, the best sort of coaching is the coaching they bring to you and say, hey, I need coaching on this. Number 4, listen with the intent to understand. Operative word here, listen. Listen. Some of the greatest leaders, I just watched a video podcast and listened to a podcast on the traits of leaders. A trait of a leader is that they are very effective speakers. The cornerstone foundational skill of a leader is empathy. So what makes a leader good is their ability to speak. What makes a leader great is their ability to listen. Listen proves that you have empathy. Take notes, listen, clarify, ask them questions like, what do you mean by that? That's interesting to me. Tell me more. Wow, that's fantastic. Even if it's information that you disagree with, keep digging, keep digging. Listen with the intent to understand. If you are interested in them, they're going to become more interested in you. And they're going to be more interested in you helping and you having them help you. So listen with the intent to understand. Number 5, provide on the job training, specifically because you will gain more respect. If you're not getting in the trenches with your people to show them, demonstrate for them some of the qualities that you are attempting to help them with, that's not good. I can't tell you the number of leaders and business owners that don't complete their 3-year goal outlook plan and are take the lead leadership series. It breaks my heart because I think to myself, this person who is the leader of the organization hasn't set their goals for themselves, their own personal goals, but I'm trying to teach them how to do personal coaching for their team. It's extremely dangerous for you not to get in the trenches, for you not to show them how you have already walked down the path that you want them to walk down. Number 6, continue dialogue while pointing to a positive future. Always point to a positive future. Never in a coaching session is there ever a time to focus on the negative. You can always turn a negative into positive. So if customer service ratings are down 25%, you've got great potential. So talk about the potential that exists. Talk about the improvement plan that is going to help you raise that customer satisfaction rating. Number 7, acknowledge good decisions and commitments to improve. Don't miss this. Don't miss the opportunity to acknowledge whenever they make a commitment. Say things like, good for you. I'm proud of you. That's fantastic. I agree with you. Acknowledge good decisions and commitments to improve. Here's some best practices. PCP, praise, coach, praise. Praise, coach, praise. Take this and just use it all day long. Praise them, coach them, praise them. PCP. I'll bring this in for a landing. We have about 5 minutes to go. The approach state versus the avoid state. When you're encouraged and you're a mentor, you're about inspiration. This is the approach state. So when a leader inspires, encourages, mentors, and coaches, a follower accepts responsibility, focuses on solutions, perseveres through adversity, and is intrinsically motivated. If you are in the avoid state, okay, if a leader is in the avoid state, discouraged, a micromanager, about desperation, a follower is going to blame others, focus on problems, make excuses, be extrinsically motivated. So it pays to remain in the approach state. Rewrite the script. If you feel like the frontal lobe of your brain is becoming disengaged as your heart rate rises, take a deep breath, step away. Couple other things to remember. Build an environment of trust. And as you build an environment of trust, if you've not read a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why, I'd strongly recommend it. Communicating with what before why causes confusion. Remember something. If you have prepared yourself and the frontal lobe of your brain is completely engaged and you're focused on what it is you want to explain to them, and you come to them with, this is what I want you to do, this is what needs to be done, this is what must happen, we must become more creative, we must stop our complaining, it's going to shut down the frontal lobe of the brain, and they're only going to be receiving in the back of their brain, which means the emotions are going to be beginning to rise. You're causing their heart rate to go up. So here's what I tell coaches. The most effective coaches in the world will communicate the why first. So we tell this story in Take the Lead training about Monica and her motivational challenges. She's having some challenges with her team converting on their sales and their profits and customer service ratings. And so Monica wants to go in and tell them what needs to be done. And through the training, we put the participants in the class in Monica's shoes, and we help rewrite the script for Monica. And so what Monica does is she comes out of that funk, goes into her coaching session, she goes into her team meeting, and she begins to tell the team, I believe in you. What ends up happening is she reaches them on their why, and then she finishes up by telling them what needs to be done. And all through the exercise, I keep asking participants, is the frontal lobe of their brain disengaged yet? Is the frontal lobe of their brain disengaged yet? And they keep saying, no, no, no. So when you communicate why first, why you're going to do something, how you're going to do it, and then what you're going to do, you'll keep the frontal lobe of their brain engaged. As I finish, I want to give you some things to think about, and then we'll go into some Q&A. Be an encourager, be a coach, be about inspiration. Ensure your team members have an opportunity to contribute. Very important. Listen and acknowledge all contributions, every contribution in accordance with your core values. So if people are bringing suggestions to you, if they're bringing thoughts to you, don't shut them down. Listen to their thoughts and always tie them into your core values. That will help you support your healthy culture. Hear everyone's point of view and empower your team to solve complex problems without you. There's no need for you to be the hero. Nobody shows up to work to fail. So your team is going to make mistakes. When they make mistakes, just rewrite it for a more positive future. Rewrite the effect. Hear everyone's point of view. Empower your team to solve complex problems without you. If you haven't checked out a TED Talk by Daniel Pink called The Puzzle of Motivation, check it out. It's a fantastic TED Talk that talks about how people that are in businesses that require creativity are much more motivated when you empower them to solve complex problems on their own. Finally, encourage everyone to take responsibility, recognize and acknowledge hard work, encourage everyone to make an effort to help each other, and ensure there's a shared sense of accomplishment. I'm in strong favor of no quotas. I'm in strong favor of no rules. I'm in strong favor of no territories. And I know that scares some of you. I am in favor of budgets. I'm in favor of goals, and I'm in favor of guidelines. All those are aspects of your coaching style that will allow people to take ownership and agree to be accountable. Finally, as I close, let me show you these last two slides, which if you've been on these webinars before, I'm sure you've seen these. When you remain in the avoid state, it creates negative energy and it decreases your influence. And when your influence decreases, remember, all situations seem impossible to handle. And so by being in the avoid state, we have evidence that you are less healthy, you don't think logically. However, when you remain in the approach state, it creates positive energy and it increases your influence. And when you do that, the situations around you always seem smaller because your influence is greater. And so you'll build this environment of trust. And as a coach, there's nothing greater than having a team that comes to you and asks you for coaching because they know the culture you're trying to create and engage. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you haven't liked us on Facebook or LinkedIn, please do so. If you're not subscribed to our podcast, please do so. If you'd like to know more about our training, please let me know. I'd love to talk to you more about that. Everybody have a great rest of the day. Talk soon.